It's been a very inspiring morning. Thank you for sharing. And it's been inspiring because there is resonance and I'm learning. So thank you so much. So I want to use these 20 minutes to talk about what's important for me in my life. I really liked what you said, Anil. We can only solve our problems, nobody else can solve it for us. And I have lots of problems in my life. So one of the things that I learned early on was to not take myself so seriously. And I used to take myself very seriously. I forgot how to play. And then came my son in my life, and then I realized that if I'm going to bring him up like I'm trying to design my life, he's going to be miserable by the time he's 15. And he's going to walk out of my life. So I often say that my best teacher is my son, and anything significant that I've learned in my life or I'm able to bring into my work, and I'm work in progress, there's so much I need to learn and accomplish, is because I'm a father, is because I'm a son, is because I'm quite an imperfect husband. And I have a very, very patient wife who has been a great partner and a friend as well. So these probably roles have defined so much of who I am. And I'm also learning to be a friend. Friendship is very important for me, and I don't think so I'm very great at it. So I'm going to offer some of these insights, and some of it may be meaningful, some of it may not be. But we're all sharing our stories, so why not? So I'm reminded of a couple of things that have been questions that have been very alive for me. One is, and I'll start with my son because that's probably the most important relationship in my life, and almost some of the most powerful questions that I ask of myself often start from my relationship with him. And you know, he's 11 now. Around when he was 9, he was practicing these bottle flips. I'm sure that happened in Thailand also and all over the world. And the whole trick is, if you can flip the bottle, it can go up and land straight and a couple of rounds, right? Now this play started in the school, and one child does it really well, and at school. Like I was asking my son the other day, his 6th grade has just started, and he says, you know, these 3 kids are really cool. And I said, what do they do? Everybody's around them. And what are you? I'm not cool. So he's learning how to do these bottle flips. And I was enjoying it. And then I got surprised because one day when I come back home, he has a YouTube channel on which he's put these bottle flips up. He says, Papa, can you do a like there? I was like, what? You are on YouTube and you've done a bottle flip? No, my friend has got 11 likes. And I've just got 1 like. I need to have at least 3 likes. So I was amused, but I was also afraid when I saw this. Because here's a serious question, right? I can't control the environment that he lives in. And he goes to a Waldorf school and Steiner education, and yet this is happening there. Where play is also now about being recognized and being liked and being seen in the world. And a simple play of bottle flips is also about who does it really well and who's the cool kid in the class who gets the maximum likes around. And when I started asking this question of myself, I also started looking at leadership, and because that's the work that I do or I'm involved in and make a living from. And I realize it starts from childhood, but it's everywhere. We all want to be liked. We all want to be seen, and sometimes our strategy to be liked or not liked is to be rebel, and sometimes it's to conform. But very few times we actually think about innovations, design, selfless work, or bringing self into service to something larger. So when I started inquiring about this, there are many things that came up as themes or insights for me, but I want to talk about 4 things here. The first, and the next thing that I picked up was, I'm introduced as a coach often, or that's the work that I'm associated with, and that's a very heavy identity to carry. And then people love coaching or people hate coaching, and then for good reasons, because when we get married to a profession or an identity, it starts defining us, and I think over a period of time it starts limiting us. It's like theatre becomes work and play is lost, or being a monk becomes so serious that the joy of life goes out of it. And how do we design so a simple salt and water combination can create chlorine, and amazing how it became then a social project for children to learn and come back to school. So how do you even get that play going again and again? So I often say coaching is something that happened to me, but it doesn't define me, and no piece of work defines me. And I want to name this as a very important tool or a thought process that all of us need to have, which is what I call as reframing. What's the frame that we choose to exist in? What's the frame that we want to define ourselves by? And I believe many of us in this room who are in social change, who care deeply for the world, also get limited by the frames that we put on ourselves. I see that in India a lot, and I often find myself belonging to neither camp. So you have this whole camp which is very heavily capitalistic and economically driven, and right from, I'm sure you see a lot of Indian kids in Singapore wanting to have this big life and go to Silicon Valley and all of that stuff, right? Hong Kong and Singapore is where all the financial wealth is. The whole idea that you right from the time you're 5 years old all the way till 21, you're working to move into an Ivy college, get a Harvard education, a Stanford education. And so that's one aspect of the world, and it's fragmented. And then the other side is this world in India, which is very close to the earth, very proudly Indian, but also pushes away anything that's economically flourishing or capitalistic in nature. And so what I often see is there is fatigue on both sides, because the frame is limited. It's almost like there is another side that is wrong or bad, and we ignore it. And what I'm inviting us to explore is, are we so married to our own identity, or what gives us meaning or purpose, that we don't see a bigger frame? Are we such great problem solvers that we don't realize that there's a world outside of problem solving? And something can evolve there, something can be born there as new consciousness. So I found reframing is a very, very important tool when designing change, when asking questions of leaders, when asking questions of myself about what's next in my life. Often fatigue for me or high stress levels are indications that my frame is small. It needs to change, something new needs to come into it. I need to include or invite something in. And that brings me to the second point that I want to talk about, which is power. For a long time in my life, power was a bad word for me. I was afraid of holding power. I used to run away from it. I did not like people who were powerful, because I realized that my own role models about power were very limited. I had very few examples of how power was used well. When I started looking around, I realized it was because many of the stories that I heard or I experienced in media or otherwise are about bad use of power. But actually a world exists where there is great use of power. And we have heard some stories here, and I'm sure there are many stories here. And that became a very, very important point for me to start reflecting, even on how I'm going to be a father, how I'm going to be a coach, how I'm going to be a leader, because whether I like it or not, I do exert a lot of influence. And whether we like it or not, all of us exert influence in our own ways. So, I think my hypothesis is that the way our brain is designed, if we allow for more play, and Shal and I loved how you spoke about play, and Raja, you talked about competition. Actually, my hypothesis is that we are more natural at collaborating. We are more natural at playing together. Shared power creates more power. There is a deficit or a lack way of thinking which says that power needs to be held and then given. And I think a lot of that is colonial hangover. Because a couple of nations in the world felt so inadequate in themselves that they had to conquer the whole world to feel good about themselves. Now it's interesting that they have probably moved on, or if we believe in the karmic theory, karmically a full circle will happen for them. But the worlds that, the nations that they conquered carry on their legacy without reframing again. What do I mean by this? I'm so inspired that you have invited us from Malaysia, Singapore, Nepal, India, Thailand to come and talk together. I shrink inside when I notice in India how much fascination for the US of A versus complete ignorance about Thailand, or complete disrespect or disregard for Nepal and what Nepal can be to India in collaboration. I feel shame around it. The first time I came to Thailand and did a workshop, for half a day I was grilled about why I was here, right? And some amazing sayings that you have about Indians, whether you can trust them or not. Right? So, there's a huge opportunity there. We say China and India are going to be superpowers of the future. I worry because in whose frame and in what model? And one of the big reframing or one of the big shared power can be about, as neighbors, why do we need to fight each other? Why do we need to look down upon each other? Why do we need to compete? Can social change as a collective be about tapping into our collective wisdom, respecting each other, co-creating, collaborating? And I do, and one of my greatest partnerships has been with leadership that works in the US. Martha has been my teacher, and one of the things that when we started this work in India, and I loved her for that conversation, and I said, I want to relate as an equal. You contributing something to me, and I'm going to contribute back to you. So, while there is a lot of truth in developing in the developed world, I loved, Anil, what you said about victimization. None of us are victims. And while there is power imbalance in the world, I think the way we can approach any change is by not looking at the power imbalance as the truth, but as a consequence of something. And visioning a world which is more equal, which has more shared power, which has a balance between the business world and the social development world, where change is not skewed, where for some it's about increasing their profits and for some it is about making a better society. Why can't they be integrated? And I'm imagining that a lot of work that Ashoka does and a lot of social entrepreneurship work is actually towards that. But there's so much, and sometimes it's not about patenting and having huge technology, right? It's about very basic solutions that can help people. That brings me to the third thing that's very, very important in my life. And I think in a way it's my purpose. I'm a very strong believer in the consciousness of love. And I think I'm oversimplifying this, but it helps me to keep it simple. There are only two consciousnesses that we choose to work in either. Either we work in a consciousness of fear or we work in a consciousness of love. And whatever we are approaching, any social change that we are approaching, any engineering solution that we are approaching, any leadership development effort that we are approaching, it can come from if you don't have this, something is missing in you, or you have so much in you, and what more can you do with it? Who can you be? And I think love is not the destination. For me, that vibration, consciousness is the starting point. For far too long, love has been made into either a parental relationship love or a romantic love. And when it gets talked about in work, also it talks about passion at work. But behind that passion is the love for something you want to see happen. The love for your own country, the love for the land that you live in, the love for self-respect comes from that place. And because I often work with the human psyche, so any change that I see outside, one of my frames or reframes is that it's also inside. What is inside is outside, what is outside is inside. There is no work there is work here, and then you do the work outside. This can be argued, I'm not sure about this, but this is my gut feel, this is my instinct that says that most of the world exists in a loveless space because of the out of balance relationship that we have with our fathers or our male authority figures. I don't suspect that is so much true with our mothers or our female authority figures. Because for the last couple of decades or centuries maybe, most fathers have got framed, limited into this whole idea of earning and providing and competing. It's not a safe world to exist in. And if that's what the fathers were ingrained into and young men were ingrained into, our social narratives have been about not connecting at a heart level with our fathers. And as much as we go and fix the broken world out there, how about starting to do the work inside with ourselves, with our fathers, with whoever that represents, so that the guru is not outside, but the guru is inside. And that empowerment starts happening. So there's a huge projection that we project out onto fathers, and they've also claimed that, and that's part of us rebuilding ourselves, bringing ourselves whole again. What is the future? What about the future inspires me? I believe that the children who are growing up, they are way more wiser than we are. I believe my son at 11 and his friends are smarter than when I was 25. And I'm inspired by that. I think they're more intuitive. They're also more connected to the field. And so if we can expand our definition of what is rationality, what is data, what is research, to also start introducing energy, to start introducing intuitive intelligence, to start understanding how the 5 elements work, water, earth, and how they transform into each other, and how do they support each other to bring balance on the planet. That gives me a lot of hope. And we don't have to wait for the children to grow up. That's the work that we've been doing over the last 1 year of introducing intuitive intelligence, of introducing energy sensibilities, of introducing purpose and working from inside out. The seed is inside us. So I often think that people who are change leaders, change makers, many of us are in this room, we forget about ourselves. We do not do self-care, we do not do self-love. I think that's been my biggest block, personally. And one of the things that I'm learning to do is to do huge amounts of self-care, which also includes play, which includes not doing anything for an outcome, which includes being inspired and listening to stories and learning from stories, which includes not competing, but giving. And which also includes discovering the child within. So that's the last thing I want to say here. Any change that we bring outside, any design that we do, any serious work that we are doing, and there might be a lot of pain involved in that. There might be a lot of distress involved in that. There might be a lot of challenges involved in that. But can we bring the child alive? Can we give the same presence to intuition as to reason? and give them both legitimacy and allow them to play with each other. Because I suspect that when we allow intuition and reason to work together, to play together, it will open up possibilities that have not been available to mankind. So those are the four or five things that are really important in my life. I'm hoping that it will be useful.